From the outside, they looked the same. Two titans of British art rock. Both born in the 60s. Both survived the loss of their charismatic leaders, and both conquered the world in the 80s. But if you look under the hood, you see two completely different machines. One was an empire built on absolute control. The other was a survival engine built on chaos. This isn't just a story about music. It's a story about how you handle pressure. Do you build a wall to keep it out, or do you learn to live inside it? In January 1967, Pink Floyd entered Abbey Road. It was a place of discipline, fixed hours, expensive tape, clear authority. What producer Norman Smith found wasn't a psychedelic mess. It was military precision. Syd Barrett arrived with the blueprints already drawn. Arnold Lane, Astronomy Domin. These weren't jams, they were finished products. Norman Smith recalled, "Syd wasn't vague. He knew exactly what he wanted to hear. The others followed because the material was already there." Inside the studio, focus. Outside the studio, the collapse began. As 1967 dragged on, Barrett's precision dissolved into static. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. On stage, he would play a single chord, over and over. The band's reaction was telling. They didn't embrace the chaos. They tried to replace the architect. Meanwhile, in Surrey, a very different band was failing to start. Genesis. Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Peter Gabriel. No studio, no clock, no manager. They rehearsed obsessively, not to perfect a vision, but to find one. Tony Banks admitted, "Nothing felt permanent. If someone didn't like something, it changed. No one owned anything completely." When they finally entered the studio in 1968, they had zero power. Their producer added orchestral overdubs without asking. They were just happy to be there. The result? From Genesis to Revelation. Released March 1969. Sales, non-existent. Concert promoters thought they were a religious group. Pink Floyd had a hit record and a mental health crisis. Genesis had a flop record and a van. From 1969 onward, Genesis survived by moving. Universities, small clubs. If a song failed on stage tonight, it was cut tomorrow. They were A/B testing their survival in real time. Mike Rutherford. "You didn't have time to protect ideas. That taught us how to survive disagreement." Pink Floyd took a different path. By 1968, they stopped picking Syd up for gigs. It wasn't a confrontation, it was an edit. They brought in David Gilmour to reinforce the structure. Recording A Saucerful of Secrets, they filled the void of Syd's genius with texture, architecture, soundscapes. By 1971, the difference was set in stone. Pink Floyd reduced uncertainty by fixing decisions in the studio. Genesis managed uncertainty by fighting it out on the road. From the outside, they looked like peers. From the inside, they were training for two very different wars. Between 1971 and 1973, Pink Floyd learned to engineer out the risk.
All are closing in, and there's nowhere you can hide.
Improvisation was replaced by calibration. Shows became smoother, standardized. We were learning how to remove surprises from the system. In 1972, they previewed The Dark Side of the Moon live. They weren't looking for applause. They were stress testing the engineering. Did the tape loops sync? Did the heartbeat hold? When the album dropped in March 1973, it didn't just sell. It became a monolith. It validated control as a philosophy. Genesis, however, was still messy. Venues changed nightly. Sound systems broke. Peter Gabriel never knew what he was walking into, so the music had to be flexible.
Yes! This mama died, good and bad, and everyone's happy to be.
Foxtrot and Selling England by the Pound were recorded quickly, often in between tour dates. Supper's Ready wasn't a grand design.
As the sound of motor cars fades in the nighttime, I swear I saw your...
It was a series of small solutions stitched together. In 1974, the strain peaked. Genesis recorded The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, a sprawling, aggressive concept album. The tour was a nightmare of malfunctioning slides and costumes. Steve Hackett noted the music was being asked to serve something rather than explore. Compare that to Pink Floyd in 1975, recording Wish You Were Here.
How I wish you were here.
The pressure was crushing, but it was internal. They were agonizing over perfection. And then the ghost returned. Syd Barrett walked into the studio. He was unrecognizable, a physical manifestation of the chaos they had tried to banish. It rattled them, but they finished the record. They polished the diamond. Genesis didn't get to polish. They broke. August 1975, Peter Gabriel quits. I guess it was somewhere around summer-autumn '74 that when I decided to quit. That was very hard, but it was definitely the right thing for me to have done. Clearly it was good for them because it sort of brought Phil out front and gave everyone a little bit more space, I think. I always look upon that time as a healthy part of growing up. To the press, it looked like the end, but Genesis had never relied on a single architect. They knew how to rebuild the engine while driving it. By 1976, Pink Floyd didn't need to tour to survive. Dark Side was printing money. They built their own studio, Britannia Row, just to escape the clock. Genesis? They were broke. They were a prog band without a singer in the middle of the punk explosion. They auditioned 400 people. All wrong. Tony Banks. Eventually, it became obvious that the only voice that really fitted was already in the room. Phil Collins stepped up. They recorded A Trick of the Tail in 6 weeks. They didn't have the luxury of writer's block. They toured relentlessly to prove they were still alive, and it worked. Pink Floyd returned in 1977 with Animals, darker, meaner, and the tour was massive. Stadiums, inflatable pigs, distance. Roger Waters spat at a fan in Montreal. He realized he wasn't performing anymore. He was just operating a machine at a distance. His response? Build a literal wall. 1979. The Wall. A project so complex Bob Ezrin called it a production system, not a record. The tour only hit 4 cities. It lost money on the road, but the album paid for it.
I knew that this was going to be a record, 3 or 4 cities, and a movie, because I knew it couldn't possibly travel.
It was the ultimate act of control. Genesis released Duke in 1980. It was their first #1 in the UK. They played 100 dates. They were evolving in public, simplifying, adapting to the 80s before the 80s even started. By 1980, the divergence was complete. Pink Floyd, a motionless giant requiring absolute perfection to move. Genesis, an agile survivor, shifting shape to fit the room. Phil Collins said, "We weren't trying to follow anything. We were trying not to get stuck." Pink Floyd was stuck. The final cut, 1983, wasn't a band record. It was a Roger Waters solo album featuring David Gilmour. No tour, no collaboration, just a final statement. And then the inevitable. Waters declared the band a spent force. He quit.
But, you know, people grow in different ways and we change as the years go by. And the time had come where we had diverged musically and philosophically and maybe politically as well. And so I needed to get out from underneath that umbrella.
He assumed the brand would die because the architect had left. He was wrong. David Gilmour and Nick Mason fought for the name.
I famously thought that we should retire, and they famously didn't. But where people have got the wrong end of the stick, because it got reported, is the idea that we fought about this in court. We never went anywhere near a court.
Genesis didn't need a judge. They had invisible touch. 1986, massive hits, stadiums. But notice the difference in philosophy. Mike Rutherford: we wanted the show to survive if something went wrong. When Pink Floyd finally returned in 1987, it was a triumph of logistics, a momentary lapse of reason. The tour grossed $135 million, but it was an automated spectacle.
Wie gesagt, die Kräne haben halt, deshalb mussten wir hier zum Beispiel allein 10.000 Quadratmeter Schichtholz haben wir hier ausgelegt, damit wir überhaupt erstmal diesen doch noch fast heiligen Rasen ohne größere Schäden befahren können. Da vorne steht also eine große selbstfahrende Arbeitsbühne, die geht bis auf 30 Meter hoch. Mit der und mit den beiden Kränen wird halt dieser ganze Bogen eigentlich aufgebaut in einer Arbeit von etwa einem Tag.
Nick Mason admitted it was a machine, a very impressive one, but it wasn't a band in the old sense. Pink Floyd ended as a monument, immobile, perfect, final. The division bell took years to make. The tour required an army. Genesis ended as a living organism. They paused, members made solo albums, they came back, they paused again. No lawsuits, no final statements.
Nighttime flies feel the pain. Drugstore takes down its chain.
The myth is that these bands were rivals in genre. But the truth is, they were opposite answers to the same question. How do you survive success? Pink Floyd built a system to eliminate uncertainty, and when the uncertainty came in the form of human conflict, the system shattered. Genesis built a system to live with uncertainty, to change singers, to change styles, to fail and fix it the next night.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased you're here. We're Genesis. And we are here to entertain you. Tonight is a very special night. Of course, we're playing in London, and it's the last stop of our tour. And it's the last show for Genesis.
One is a monument to perfection. The other is a lesson in survival. Pink Floyd proved that if you build a wall, you can create a masterpiece. But Genesis proved that if you keep the door open, you can keep playing.